Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. Now things didn't really go as planned this year with Christmas launches and we had to move a couple because of the way products were arriving, and we still had a couple products that were stuck on a ship and came in last minute, but thankfully they're more winter themed than Christmas. And here in Wisconsin, winter themed means you can probably use them up until March and still have them work. But all jokes aside, I'm so excited about this release. It's small but mighty, but it is so adorable. I can't wait to create some winter cards with it. So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through the products and then we'll create some cards together using them. And everything that I use in today's video is available now, so I'll leave links down below, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off strong, we have this clear photopolymer 4x6 stamp set called Skating By. It features a bunch of super cute illustrations of different animals skating. So you have this polar bear with a scarf and a stack of gifts, this little bunny in his Christmas sweater, another little polar bear going the other direction with a scarf, and then this fox which is sort of dressed up like Santa with a little Santa hat and a stack of gifts. You also have this cute little snowman that can stand alone or be around them as they're skating, and then a ton of different sentiments to use. So you have bear hugs, I come bearing gifts, let it snow, sending Christmas cheer, burr, skating by to say hi, happy holidays, and warm wishes. We really packed a ton of different sentiments in, and in two different styles, so you can go with a little bit more script or a little bit bolder of a font. I love all of the options you have with this set, and usually we do super large 6x9 stamp sets, so 4x6 is a little bit of a newer size for us, but this is really great if you want to spend a little bit less money, but still have tons of images packed inside of the set for you to craft with. And then there's also a die set available to cut out all of the images in this set. Of course, Spellbinders does the amazing dies. They're already de-tabbed and separated apart for you, so all you need to do is take them out of the packaging and put them on whatever storage you want. Here I like to use Stampin' Storage magnet cards because they're nice and thick on kind of a chipboard backing, so your dies aren't going to go anywhere, but I love having coordinating dies to cut things out. So it'll cut out all of the images inside of this set. I love that. It's going to be a huge time saver when crafting with these images. Next, we have another brand new type of product that we've never created before. This is a photopolymer stamp set in combination with a stencil set, which is really awesome. A huge thanks to my Ranger team for pulling this off. I know this was a little bit more difficult, but I wanted to make sure there was stencils inside of the set to make it so versatile and really usable for all of you. So this is called Ethereal Trees, and let me open it up and show you all that you get inside. So inside of the package is this photopolymer stamp set of these two really beautiful, super fine lined detailed trees. I absolutely love them, and you get one that's just a little bit taller and a little bit wider, and then one that's slightly shorter and a little bit thinner. That way you have some variety when you're stamping with the trees, but they're both drawn in the exact same style. And in case you wanted to know, this large tree is about 4 inches tall, and this shorter tree is just a little under 4 inches. So they're quite substantial as well. And then inside of the package, you'll also get this little pack of stencils. These again are smaller stencils than what we usually do, but we wanted to give you a really great value with this set. So the first stencil in this set will do baubles on top of the tree, so it will create kind of an ornament look for Christmas. And the second set will do leaves for the tree. So I know that during the winter time there's no leaves on the trees, but I wanted to make it like this so you can do fall colors if you wanted to, or do green and really bring this into all seasons and use these trees all year long. So I love that we were able to include the stencils along with to really make these trees be usable all year for every single season of card making. And the stencils are really easy to line up with the tree images. I'll show you later how to use them, but super simple. You can kind of just eyeball it and lay it on top to embellish the trees. And then on the back, we always show different examples of what you can do with them. So here's what they look like with their leaves and with the ornaments on top. I'm just in love with the Ethereal Trees set. And last but not least, we have a 6x6 stencil called Dazzling Snowflakes. I'm obsessed with this. I've never done snowflakes quite this detailed and geometric inside of a stencil, so I'm absolutely in love with how this stencil turned out. I can't wait to show you guys a bunch of techniques in this video using the stencil, and here's an example of what it looks like on the back. Again, tons of detail. I'm going to love using these during the winter and Christmas card making season. And then last but not least, I wanted to bring your attention to this. We just recently released the Streamline 3D embossing folder with Spellbinders, and I just wanted to show you how well these work together with the skaters. We really created these so that they work together. So of course this works with the skiers and snowboarders that I just released, but it'll also work really well with these skaters because those line textures are like the perfect skating lines. So I think that's super awesome. Definitely pick up the Streamline 3D embossing folder if you don't have it, if you're getting these stamps, because they're gonna work together so seamlessly. All right, so let's start off by just showing the most basic way to use the dazzling snowflake stencil, just putting inks or paste right through the design, because I want to show you just how stunning this design really is. So to start, I'm going to place down my ultra sticky mat from Altenew. I love this to hold down everything while I'm stenciling. It's got a gridded side and a smooth side. You want that smooth side facing up towards you. Then I'm going to go in with my Simon Hurley stark white cardstock and place that right down. It holds that in place nicely. And then we'll go in with our stencil. Now, all of the most recent Simon Hurley stencils are made with this new material, which is just slightly more durable than the other material that we used. The older stencils in my line had a shinier side and a more matte side. You just want to be careful that when you're using any sort of sticky mat, that you stick it down with the shiny side facing down. This matte side has a little bit of coating on it, and if you stick it down to anything super sticky like these mats, it's gonna peel that coating off slightly. It doesn't ruin the stencil at all, it just doesn't look as nice. So shiny side of the stencil facing down towards anything sticky. Now with this new stencil material, both sides of the stencil are shiny. So you don't have to worry about using one side or the other. You can use either side down towards that sticky mat and nothing is gonna peel off. All right, just wanted to make that super clear. We can go in then and stick this down into our sticky mat to hold it in place on our project. All right, then let's go in and add some color to our stencil. So I also love this large sticky mat because when you lay down your ink pads, it holds those in place too, off to the side here. So I'll start off with a little bit of Clear Skies Stellar ink, and we're using our Simon Hurley medium blending brushes, and I'm just gonna go in here and blend on the ink. Now I'm not gonna do this in stripes or anything. I'm actually gonna do this in little sections of color on the project. So just lightly tap it into the ink pad and start blending onto our surface to get your desired color. Obviously, the lighter you tap and the lighter you blend, the lighter that color is going to turn out. But if you want it a little bit darker, add a little bit more ink down and go in with a little bit more pressure. All right, moving into our next color, which is this gorgeous Pampas color. You'll see that with my blending brush, this is my purple blending brush. I have one of these for each sort of color family of inks. You wanna make sure to clean it off in between uses. You could go in and clean it with water, but I don't wanna wait for the brush to dry. So I find the best way to do this is taking a paper towel and just going off to the side and blending off some of that color. Then I'll tap into my new color, blend it onto the surface, and keep doing that until you think that you have the desired color that you want and all of the darker color out of your brush. So I think that's pretty good. And then we'll move into this gorgeous Pampas color. And I'm going to blend this right next to that Clear Skies, and it's gonna blend together beautifully. This is a really nice, beautiful lavender color, and I absolutely love it for kind of wintry or Christmas blends like this. All right, I love that. Blending into Clear Skies, and you get just a little bit of a darker purple as it overlaps too. Then keeping this blend kind of softer and icy looking, I'm gonna go in using a little bit of Iced Out, and I actually have a blending brush for lots of different lighter colors like this. So Iced Out is really light and kind of this icy greenish blue color, which I love. And I'm going to blend this in with the blue and that lavender color, and it's gonna create a really gorgeous color in between. And I'll just fill in the rest of the areas with Iced Out. All right, then we'll lift the stencil off and check out those gorgeous snowflakes that you get on your project. I'm so in love with how they turned out. I used really soft colors here to get that kind of wintry look, but you could totally go in with more bold colors if you want to. But I think this is absolutely stunning. Now next I want to show you a really fun way to layer up your stencils and shift them in ways you might not think to do. So of course I could have added a clear sparkly paste right on top of that to make these snowflakes sparkly, but we're gonna step it up a little notch. So I'm gonna go in with some mint tape. I like to do anything with my pastes right onto my glass surface so I don't get my other work surfaces messy or full of paste or glitter. And then instead of doing this right on top of each other, I'm actually going to, let's rotate and kind of shift that stencil a little bit, and that way it's going to line up new snowflakes kind of right in between the other ones, in some areas overlapping a little bit, but I think that's gonna be so cool. So we'll lay this down, and then I'm going in with my trusty mint tape, and I'm going to mask off the edges. That's going to hold down the stencil in place, but it's also going to keep the paste from kind of spilling over and underneath our project. So I like to tape all around the edges, but if you want to use less tape, you could totally skip this part and just move on. But it just keeps the cleanup a little bit easier. Okay, so now I have to choose. We have 3 clear, sparkly Astro pastes in the line. There's Frostbite, which is completely clear with completely clear glitter. This gives kind of an icy look, which is really cool. And then you have these 2, which are a little bit more sparkly. This is Phoenix Feather and Unicorn Horn. And on the packaging of these 2, the sparkles have either like yellow and orange or blue and purple. And I want to use Unicorn Horn because that's the blue or purple, and that's going to give me kind of an icy, shiny look, but it still is clear and see-through. So let's go in and grab a little bit of the Unicorn Horn paste, and I'm going to spread it across the surface. You want to use a little bit less of the Astro paste than you would with other pastes, especially with this clear Astro paste, because sometimes it picks up the color of the ink. So you can always go in with more, but sometimes if you tint it with color, you can't put it back into the jar because it'll contaminate it. I don't think it's going to do that in this instance because there's not a ton of ink. So then I'm going to use the Simon Hurley spreading tool. This is in the paste tool set, and I'm going to go in and swipe this down to spread the paste across our project. Now, if you keep going like this and you notice that the paste doesn't reach all the way to the edge, but you still have paste on your tool, you're going to take your tool and face it a little bit more down towards your project and then spread. That's going to release the paste and spread it across the surface. And then once you got the paste fully covered across the background, you can then use it at more of an upright angle, and that's going to scrape any of the excess paste off of the surface. That little bit of ink on the surface didn't contaminate my paste at all with color. You'll be able to notice if it's tinted a little bit, but this wasn't, so I can put this right back into the jar to use for the next time. If the ink happens to tint your paste, which it might sometime during this video, and I'll show you then, you just take that little bit of excess and scrape it on a piece of cardstock, and then once it dries, you can use it for die cutting or as a background for another project. All right, then we can lift that right off of our surface. And like I said, that little bit of taper on the edges really makes cleanup super easy. And then we'll set our background off to the side to dry. And then just like with any one of the Simon Hurley pastes, spray it down with water and clean off your tools right away. So we'll go in and just wipe off any of the excess Astro paste that was left on my stencil or tools. And it just wipes up super easy from your glass surface as well. And check out how that Unicorn Horn paste looks once it's completely dry. I wanted to show you on my iPhone because the camera is totally different and really shows that intense, amazing sparkle. But I love that when you look at it straight on, it's still completely see-through too. Such a cool technique to shift the stencil and get new snowflakes in between the design. Another really fun way to use your stencils in a unique way is doing embossing with the stencils, which is so cool to add some texture to your projects. So to do this in your Platinum 6 die cutting machine, you'll use the A platform base, the B platform top, place those right inside, and then you'll go in with this squishy E mat. This is the squishy gray material. You want that, that's gonna act as a little bit of a cushion to press the stencil into. Then you're going to bring in a piece of your stock white cardstock, and to get it ready to kind of mold to the design, I like to just lightly mist this on both sides to help it form to the design of your stencil. Place that right down, and then we'll bring in the Dazzling Snowflakes stencil and lay it right on top of our project. Lastly, you'll use the D adapter plate, which is that hard gray plate, place it right on top, and then we're going to run this right through our die cutting machine. It's not gonna feel like a ton of pressure, but it is embossing that stencil design underneath there. And then once you take this out, check that out. It doesn't look like a ton right now. Maybe you can see it a little bit, but it'll really come to life once we add a little bit of ink down to the design. All right, so to highlight the embossing in a design like this, you're going to want to use a domed foam blending tool instead of a blending brush. The blending brush has so many bristles, it's gonna give a nice smooth blend no matter what, whereas this will give you a little bit more of a highlighted look when it hits those embossed areas. I'll show you. So here I'm gonna use a little bit of Loch Ness, which is a new ink color from my line. I absolutely love this one. And I'm just gonna go in and start blending, and you'll see that it leaves the area around the embossing a little bit lighter, and it'll kind of highlight those snowflakes a little bit. And you can keep blending around, and it's just going to give those snowflakes a little bit of a darker look and highlight it with that blending sponge. It's a really cool technique, and I absolutely love the effects of it. Just a really quick demonstration of another opportunity to use the stencil, but I thought that it would be so cool to show you it with these snowflakes. These look really great embossed, and embossing is something you usually couldn't do with your stencils. So getting that really cool, subtle texture throughout is amazing, and another awesome way to use your stencils with your die cutting machine. All right, next I want to show just how fun it is to use coordinating stamps and stencils together, and I love this ethereal trees set for doing just that. So of course, even though this is a stamp and stencil set, we still made sure to use high quality, made in the US photopolymer stamps, so you're still getting that really great quality material from these photopolymer stamps. And we'll add these onto some acrylic blocks so we can do our stamping. All right, to stamp out the trees, I'm going in with Stellar ink in the Weeping Willow. I love this rich chocolatey brown color so much. And with Stellar inks, it just takes a couple of light taps to really get a great inking on these stamps. And then I'll go in on my card project and stamp that right down. Lift it off and check out that really great, incredible solid stamping. And what I love about Stellar inks is it stamps super solid, but it also gets all those little tiny details in the tree too, which is great. All right, let's do one more of these large trees to create a tree line. So again, light taps across the surface, and then we'll stamp this one a little bit lower to make it look like a smaller tree. And there we go. And then what's really fun is to create a little bit of versatility. I can take this smaller tree, ink it up, and then I'll take a piece of scrap cardstock off to the side and stamp this down one time first on that scrap cardstock. That's going to give me the first generation stamping, and then I can bring this right onto my project and stamp it that second time. And that's going to give me a much lighter look. This is second generation stamping. So it's gonna make it look like that's a tree that's a little bit further out in the distance, which I really love. If you wanna build a nice treescape like this, make some look closer and some further, definitely try that second generation stamping technique. It's a great way if you don't have a million different colors of inks to get a lighter version of the exact same tone. All right, now let's go in and use the coordinating stencils. So I'm gonna use the baubles because I want this to look like a winter skating scene, but of course use the leaves if you want it for any other season. So I'm gonna start off doing ornaments for the smaller tree first. I'm gonna go right in here and just line them up right on the tree. The stencil is see-through, so you can see exactly where they're going, and you don't need to line them up perfectly. That's the beauty of these stencils. The ornaments are just supposed to loosely kind of swag across, so it doesn't need to be perfect. And then I'll go in with just a little bit of mint tape to hold this in place while we do our stenciling. So for the smaller tree, I'm gonna go in with the Fool's Gold Astro paste color, which is this really gorgeous kind of yellowy gold. I'm gonna put a little bit on my little palette knife from the paste tool set, and a little bit goes a very long way with this. You can just spread that nicely through the stencil. And I like the point on this palette knife because it's really easily able to get into that stencil and all of the little details of it. Then we'll take any of the excess and put that right back into the jar. All right, then we'll lift off our stencil. We'll go in and make sure to clean off our stencil in between uses so we don't get that paste anywhere else and so that it doesn't dry. Now what's amazing about any of my pastes is they're all pretty heat stable, so you can use your heat tool to help speed along the drying process. So I'm using my Ranger heat tool, and I'm just gonna go in here and heat this project. Just make sure to keep the heat tool kind of moving around so you don't bubble up your paste at all, but it definitely helps it along the drying process, especially when it's such a small area like what's on this tree. And that looks perfect. I just wanted to make sure that was nice and dry before we do the other areas because we'll be kind of putting the stencil on top of it. All right, next to that gold, I'm going to line up the ornaments on the larger tree. Here I want red glittery ornaments, so I'm going in with Astro paste in the color Bee Sting. Grab a little bit of that Bee Sting paste and spread it easily through the stencil. And then we can put any of the excess right back into the jar for next time. Then we'll lift off that stencil, and we have baubles perfectly stenciled on that larger tree. This is looking amazing so far, and for this third tree, I'm again going to lay down the ornaments right on top. And here I'm going to use Tropical Tango Astro Paste, which is this glittery teal color, and then we'll go through and apply this right through our stencil. And this is like one of my favorite colors in the line. It is absolutely gorgeous. And when you lift that off, check that out. All right, and what's so cool about these Astro pastes is they become even sparklier when they're dry, but once they're dry, they're not gonna rub off on your recipient's hand, so there won't be glitter everywhere, because I absolutely love how glitter looks, and I love it on my projects, but I hate when glitter gets everywhere, so Astro paste is amazing once it's dry. And check out just how cute those ornaments are on the tree. They really create a lot of versatility for the images and using your different pastes and mediums along with your stamping. Let's turn some of these backgrounds into cards by stamping out a couple of the images from the Skating By stamp set. So I'm gonna use the polar bear, this little snowman, and these two little skaters. And then to stamp these images down, I'm going to use my Simon Hurley watercolor cardstock. There's kind of a textured side and a little bit of a smoother side. I'm going to use the smooth side to get perfect stamping. And because I'm watercoloring, I want waterproof black ink. So I'm going to go in with a VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink to stamp these down and get a really crisp impression. And stamp it down. Give it some good pressure. Perfect. And I'll follow suit, stamping down the rest of the images onto my watercolor cardstock. Now VersaFine is a pigment ink, so to seal that in, I'm going to go in with a little bit of clear heat embossing powder and sprinkle that right over top of the images. Tap off any of the excess and heat it until it's clear and shiny. All right, then I'm going to take my Simon Hurley and Stellar inks and swipe them down onto my glass craft sheet to create a palette of colors that we can lift from to do our watercoloring. And with the Stellar inks, you just need to really lightly tap on a little bit of that color, and a little bit goes a really long way with the Stellar ink. So I'm just following along with some of the colors that I use on my backgrounds to use in my watercoloring. Then I'll add a little bit of water down onto my glass surface, and we can go in and start our painting. Now, whenever using watercolor cardstock or regular cardstock, I always like to add water down to prepare it to take the inks. Otherwise, inks like to sink right in and not really blend around. So this will help that. And then for anything white, like this snowman, we want to add a little bit of depth. I have this new color called Iced Out, which is really great for adding depth to like snow. It'll give it kind of an icy look. So I'll just go in here with a little bit of Iced Out, and that's gonna add an icy look to kind of shade that snow in. It's super subtle. I don't even know if you're seeing it too much on camera, but hopefully it picks it up a little bit. Very, very subtle, but you can see it more in person. Then for his scarf, I'm going in with Pompous, which is this nice lavender color. I'm gonna color that right in. And his hat has a little bit of white on it, and so to shade that in, I'm gonna use a little bit of Woof. That's a little too dark. Water it down quite a bit, and that will give us a nice kind of shaded white look. So I use Ice Out for snowy shading and Woof for regular kind of white shading. And then I'll follow suit with these other images to color them all in as well. So starting off with a layer of water to make sure we can blend our color. And then for the polar bear, I want him to be kind of a true white, so I'm shading him in with a little bit of Woof. And then we can bring it along the edges to add some depth and dimension to him. And if you want the color a little bit darker, go in with a little bit less water, and you can bring that a little closer to the edge. Using less water will get you a more intense color. And then we'll color in his gifts with red, green, and yellow. So starting off with Bee Sting here at the bottom. And again, if you want the color more intense on one side, go in with less water and add more down, and that'll give it kind of a shaded look. Then I'll add a little bit of Ivy League for this middle gift to make it green. And then we'll use a little bit of Slippery and Wet to finish it off. All right, and here's what all those images look like colored in. They look so cute, and it's so easy to do using Stellar inks on that watercolor cardstock. It takes the water beautifully, and there's like no warping, and the coloring looks great. So then I'll go in with the coordinating die set to cut all these out really easily. All you have to do is just line the dies up right around the image with a little bit of a white border. And then I'll go in using a little bit of mint tape to hold them in place while we run them through our die cutting machine. All right, then we'll throw this into our die cutting machine and run it right through to die cut these out. And then check it out, they pop out super easily with a nice white border. So those dies save you a ton of time rather than having to fussy cut these images out. All right, and I want to use this little snowman on top of the stencil background, but I find that it might be a little bit too busy for it. So whenever I have that happen and I need a little grounding place, I grab a little bit of vellum and one of these stacking shapes. I've been loving the Stencil stylish ovals lately, and I'll grab one of these little ovals. I think that's probably a good size, and die cut it out of the vellum instead of using white cardstock. Then we can adhere the snowman right down to the vellum using a little bit of foam tape to pop it up. And then we'll add a little bit of adhesive right down underneath the vellum under the image so you can't see it. And then add this right down onto our card. And that vellum is so awesome because instead of being white or colored cardstock where it covers up the background, it just kind of makes it a little bit foggy in that area to really highlight the focal point, but not take away fully from the background. I love that trick using vellum. And then I stamped and heat embossed the Warm Wishes sentiment onto some lavender cardstock from the Skating By stamp set. And there's a closer look at my finished card. I love this one with that stencil background using the dazzling Snowflake stencil and then shifting it with Unicorn Horn Astro paste to add a completely different look and add more snowflakes. It's such a fun way to get more use out of your stencils in a way they weren't necessarily designed to do, but it looks so stunning. And then finishing it off with that adorable snowman really completes it with the Skating By stamp set. Next, to finish off this scene, I'm going in with a scrap piece of cardstock from my Stark White cardstock, and I'll just go in and cut across and create a little slope that's very slight on the cardstock. I don't know, a little something like that. It's almost straight across, but not quite. All right, and then I trimmed down the bottom nice and straight until it looks about like this. To add a snowy look to this slope, I'm gonna go in using a little bit of iced out ink and just blend down from the top with our medium ink blending brush to give it kind of that icy, snowy look. I'm obsessed with this ink color, It is a total must-have for wintry cards. And see, it just creates that nice kind of icy look. And to step this up a notch and make it look even a little bit more snowy, we can go in using the Unicorn Horn Astro paste. And again, just take a little bit on my finger, and I'm just going to tap it across the surface, more kind of towards the top, to give it that snowy and icy look with a bunch of that beautiful holographic glitter. And then sort of lightly tap it down a little bit further to blend it in with the rest of the cardstock. And that adds so much sparkle and shine, it looks absolutely amazing. All right, then let's adhere this right down to our background. Line it up and paste that down. All right, then let's go in and add this little skating polar bear right on top in between those trees to really highlight him. I think that is so adorable. Really completes the scene nicely. And then to finish off the card completely, let's go in with a sentiment. I like the I come bearing gifts. And to get a perfectly crisp sentiment, I'm gonna go in using my Black Widow ink and the Stellar ink, really lightly tap onto that sentiment, and then we'll stamp that right down onto the snow underneath the bear. Perfect. And here's a closer look at that finished card. I love how we used the Ethereal Trees coordinating stencils to create this absolutely gorgeous background, using the bauble stencils on top of the tree to get a ton of beautiful shine on the ornaments, and then finishing it off with the adorable polar bear from the Skating By stamp set. I love this image so much, it brings such a big smile to my face, and I can't wait to send it out. All right, next let me show you another really stunning way to use your stencils that you might not always think of. And this works really well with Stellar ink because of that foam pad. It releases a ton of ink on the surface, which is exactly what you want. So I'm starting off with the lightest color that I'm going to use, which is Clear Skies. And I'm just going to drag this right across that stencil to put a bunch of ink down onto the surface. Moving on, we'll go into our next color. Here I'm going to use Midnight Snack. And we'll swipe this right next to Clear Skies. Doesn't need to be perfect at all, just get lots of ink down there. And then lastly, I'm gonna use 100% juice. I love this color combo together, and I'm just going to swipe that up top right above Midnight Snack. And although it looks a little bit like a hot mess right now, you'll see the vision in just a second. So next I'm going to take my water and I'm just going to mist this down to get those inks moving onto the surface. And I always say, you want the ink to run and blend together. Once it's starting to do that, you know you have the right amount of water on the surface there. Then I'll bring in my Simon Hurley watercolor cardstock, and I'm going to flip this right down onto that watercolor cardstock. And then this part is important. I'm going to go in with some paper towel, and I'm going to press down the design. This paper towel is going to sop up any of the excess ink that's coming out of that stencil to keep your design nice and crisp. It's very important to have this as you're pressing that design down. Otherwise, you're going to get bleeding inks underneath and it's not going to stay nice and crisp. And because we use so much water for this technique, that watercolor cardstock is super important. So you want to just give this a minute, let the inks kind of soak into that watercolor cardstock before we lift it off, because we don't want puddles or moving the inks around. All right, and you can kind of tell when it's ready, and we'll lift this right off the surface. All right, and once that's all dry, check it out. I'm absolutely obsessed with how it looks, and you can really see that Simon Hurley watercolor cardstock held up super well with just a little bit of warping, but we used so much water on this. I definitely recommend using a watercolor cardstock to help it not warp or get kind of ruined underneath all that water. And you'll get a little bit of a different look every time. If your design isn't super crisp, maybe use less water. If you didn't get enough ink on the surface, maybe use a little bit more water. All right, then to turn this into a card, let's trim it down. I'm gonna use this Tim Holtz Decal Edge trimmer. I find that I pull this out a lot during the holidays because I like that kind of finished decal edge. It's super cool. You can just go in here and create a nice decal that's perfectly straight on your card project. And then check it out. That decal is really a cool edge. It almost looks like torn paper. And what's so cool about this is it's not like a repeating pattern. It's unique all the way around. So if you want to move it around, you get a different decal as you trim. I don't know, I just think it's kind of a cool finished edge, especially for the holidays. Like I said, I bring this out a lot during Christmas season. And then if you know me, you know that I can't help but add a little bit of dimension with inks around the card. So I'm just gonna go in with the same exact colors that I used on that stenciling. So here I'm using 100% juice, and I'm just going in with my medium ink blending brush and just blending this a little bit into the edge to just darken up that edge and give it a little bit more drama. And then going in with Midnight Snack, and I'll just keep the color that I'm blending on top of where that color is stamped onto the surface. So blending in a little bit of Midnight Snack on each edge, and then I'll finish it off on this side using a little bit of Clear Skies ink. And you can see just what an incredible difference adding a little bit of color along the edge really makes to the card. It makes the edge a lot darker and the center a lot lighter, so naturally your eye is going to be drawn into the center where it's lighter, and that's where you're going to put your focal point. But check that out. It really creates such a drastic difference. If a card looks a little bit unfinished, this can kind of help bring it to life. So I highly recommend trying it. For the focal point, I'm going to use the Layering Snowflakes die set that I created with Spellbinders. I think we released this last year, but it's got a really large snowflake and then different little ones that you can use separately or layer together. And each one also has a shadow die too. So a ton to use in this set, but I'm just going to use these 3 snowflakes by themselves. So to do our die cutting, I'm going to use my little mini Scout die cutting machine that I created with Spellbinders in this beautiful black color, which is nice and sleek. I love this little machine so much because it has metal rollers in it, so it's got all the same power as a large machine, but it's nice and portable for your desk or to take on the go. And to die cut these out, I'm going to go in with my stark white cardstock for these 2 smaller snowflakes, and then for the large snowflakes, I'm going to use a piece of vellum to cut it out to make it a little bit more see-through. And then we'll go in and die cut these guys out. And we'll awkwardly stare at each other as we run them through. All right, that is absolutely perfect, and it cut through like a dream. And then we'll pull these little snowflakes out right as well. And I'm just gonna use a little die pick to pop out any of the extra little pieces. All right, like I said, you can use any of these snowflakes separate, but let me show you just how easily they layer up. So there's different options as you do this. You can either take the snowflake points and lay them on top of each other like this, or you can rotate the next snowflake so that the points are right in between, like that. So you create 2 completely different looks just by how you line them up. So I'm gonna take a little bit of liquid adhesive on this middle snowflake, and for today's card, I'm gonna line it up right in the middle so that all the points are in the same direction, just like that. Then for this top little snowflake, I'm gonna add a little bit of sparkle and shine to make it stand out. So I'm again going in with that clear unicorn horn paste. I'm gonna take just a little bit on my finger like this, and I'm just going to lightly tap that onto the surface of the snowflake. This is a really easy way to add glitter to your project that won't come off once it's dry. Just lightly tap on the surface to fully coat the whole snowflake. And because we've applied it so thin, it takes a lot less time to dry. And again, I'll just use my heat tool to help kind of speed along the process. So then I'll add glue to the back of my snowflake. And for this one, instead of going straight on top of each other, I'm going to rotate this top one so that it goes in between the layers of the last one. And check that out, you make the absolute most stunning snowflake ever. I love it. To add the snowflake down to my card, I added little pieces of foam tape on the points of the snowflake that you won't be able to see. And then we'll adhere this front and center down onto our card. I love how that foam tape pops it up. And I also love the outside edge of the snowflake was done out of vellum. That's a really great way if you don't want to cover up a ton of your card, but you still want the idea of something there. And it works really well with this snowflake image. And my film camera does just about the worst job capturing that shimmer and shine. So let me show you on here. That unicorn horn Astro paste is so gorgeous on top of that snowflake. Like I said, a true winter must-have. For the sentiment, let's jump into the Skating By stamp set and pull out the little Let It Snow sentiment. And I'm gonna heat emboss this on some navy blue cardstock. So I'll use my anti-static powder tool to make sure there will be no powder where we don't want it. Then we'll use a little bit of Versamark clear sticky ink to ink up my sentiment and stamp it down onto the cardstock. Then we'll sprinkle on some white heat embossing powder, tap off any of the excess, and then I'll heat set this until it's nice and bright white. And there are not dies for the sentiments in this set, but let me tell you, they're super easy to cut out. You could either leave this on a rectangle of cardstock, or I like to just go in with a little fine detail scissors and just cut right around the sentiment, leaving a little bit of a border, and this just helps give it a nice finished look. All right, then we'll go in and pop the sentiment right below the snowflake on some foam tape. And then finally, we'll add this all to a card base. I'm gonna go in with my top folding pre-cut and scored stark white card bases. All you need to do is pull this out of the package and score it down, and you've got yourself a card base that's nice and ready. Now all you gotta do is add some adhesive down to your card panel and add that right down onto your card base. And here's a closer look at the finished card. I love that background technique that we created using the dazzling snowflake stencil and stamping with it using our stellar inks. It gives you a completely different and reverse look of whatever the stencil creates, which is absolutely stunning. And then finishing it off with the layered snowflake set, that is such a great focal point, and I love that we added a little bit of unicorn horn paste to really bring that to life with a ton of sparkle. I'm obsessed with how this card turned out, and I can't wait to send it out during this winter season. Last but not least, I want to create a card using the Streamline embossing folder as a little bonus to show you how it works with these images because it is so amazing. So I'm going to go in with my stark white cardstock, and whenever I'm doing a 3D embossing folder, I like to go in and just lightly mist the cardstock with a little bit of water. This helps prevent cracking and helps it mold to the design a little bit easier. So if you have a problem with your cardstock ripping or cracking, definitely try this before embossing. Then I'm gonna go in, and what I love so much about Spellbinders embossing folders is they're quite a bit larger than an A2 size card, so you really have a lot of room to decide where you want to put it on your project. And I'm thinking right about there is good. I like that a lot. And to do a Spellbinders 3D embossing folder, you'll take out most of the plates except for your A platform base. Then you'll go in with the 3D embossing folder, and then right on top you'll do the D adapter plate, which is this hard gray plate, and place that right on top. Then we'll run this through our die cutting machine to emboss the design. Every embossing folder and machine is a little bit different, so check with your manufacturer of your folder and machine to make sure that it's gonna work. But this is the perfect sandwich for Spellbinders 3D embossing folders inside of the Platinum 6. And then when I open this up, check it out. This gives you such a cool embossed design. I love it. It creates these really great line details all over your surface. Looks like they're skating or skiing all over. Then you also have little tiny dots of like ice or snow along those lines to add even more cool texture. So you can flip it around for the debossed side or keep it textured with the embossed side. I think this folder is so cool. I'm gonna trim this down with my decal trimmer again. So just go in and trim it down a little bit. And this gives it that super cool textured edge and adds a little bit of interest. And then again, I can't resist adding a little bit of depth and dimension. And for this snowy, glowy, icy look, I love this new iced out color. I'll take this on my medium ink blending brush and just blend it a little bit onto the surface, starting from the edge. This gives it a nice soft, icy glow, and at least gives it a little bit of color rather than leaving it just blank white. All right, that little bit of color around the edge is absolutely perfect. Now, after all, it is a wintry card, so I want a little bit of sparkle and shine as well. So I'm gonna go in with Solar Spray in the color Neptune, which is this beautiful kind of blue iridescent color. Now you'll notice when you don't use this for a while, I had this on its side, so all of the mica settles to the side. There's a little mixing bowl inside of here, so be sure to shake it up really well before you use it. That's gonna mix around the mica and make sure that your straw doesn't get clogged at the bottom. I like to think of this as my little crafting workout. It's like shake weights for crafting, but you gotta shake your Solar Sprays. Once that's all mixed together and you don't see any mica at the bottom, we can go in and mist this down. And I'm gonna go in and just lightly mist this across the surface. You'll see there's a ton of mica on my surface here. So I'll just go in and clean that off with a little bit of water. But this creates such a cool effect because looking at it straight on, you don't really see Solar Spray. It doesn't have any color, just the mica inside of it. And then when you tilt it in the light, you get all of that amazing, intense colored shine. How cool is that? So again, none at all. And then when you tilt it, you see all of that. It's absolutely incredible. It's really hard to capture on my main camera though, so hopefully my iPhone was able to show you what I'm seeing in real life, but the shimmer is absolutely amazing. And I mean, how fun is this? Then you can take your little guys from the Skating By stamp set and put them really anywhere along these lines. I think right in the center though, along this line, is gonna be perfect. So cute. And then for the sentiment, I'm gonna use the sentiment that says Skating By to say hi. And to keep it festive and nice and crisp, I'm gonna stamp that down using a little bit of Ivy League ink from my Stellar ink line. Really light taps onto the sentiment is gonna get great ink coverage, and then I'll stamp it right down. Perfect. And I love that that color now matches the scarf that we watercolored in. Then I'll go in and super easily fussy cut right along that sentiment. And then we'll add that sentiment down front and center onto our card. And here's a closer look at that finished card. It's so simple, but yet so adorable. That streamlined embossing folder goes really well with these Skating By images and creates such a cute card. I love that they can be skating along the texture of these lines that the embossing folder creates, and you can keep it really simple, but it still adds lots of detail to the background. So a really fun way to pair together products that you might already have along with the new stuff in this launch. All right, well, thank you guys so much for joining me for today's launch. I really enjoyed sharing this small but mighty collection with you and showing how it relates to other products that I've launched before and really diving into those stencil techniques. Leave a comment down below letting me know which card from today's video was your favorite. And also down there is a full supplies list to everything that I used and all the new products that just came out. And using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Thanks so much again for spending time and crafting with me, and I'll see you soon for another card making and crafting video. Have a great day. Bye.